going to be talking about our sink or swim candidates for each NHL team. That is going to be in the Canadian division. Now, one thing to note about the Canadian division is that each of these teams are not just playoff hopefuls, but I think each one of these teams sees themselves in a normal division alignment.
Each?
Okay, not each. Sorry, Ottawa being a little bit of an after thought there. No disrespect for what they're doing. Think they're building really the right way, but 6 of the 7 Canadian teams.
Just real quick, you may notice the Canadiens logo on my mug here. If Cam had a logo on his, it would be a Senators logo. So I just really quickly want to address that, no matter which team you're representing as a fan, we hope that this will be a podcast where you feel like it's represented well. It gets pretty tiring, I think, to, be listening to coverage of one form or another, and it feels like if, if it's not specifically tailored to your team, you feel like, maybe not always a fair representation. So we're going to give that our best go. If you feel like we haven't, feel free to let us know in the comments or whatever. But
yeah, this is going to be pretty intense, and so I think there's going to be some pretty fierce rivalries. I think there could be some disappointments in terms of playoffs, and I just really think that it's going to be fun to get into the sink or swim to see what can make the difference for each one of these teams coming up. So,
do you have anything more you'd like to add about Ottawa?
No, I mean, we went from Columbus, there's a Domi-Anderson connection to the next destination that we're going, which is the mecca of hockey, Montreal. So, as a resident Habs fan, I'm going to just turn this over to you. Give me your thoughts here.
So, I'm gonna be high on the Habs.
Yeah.
But if you've been listening to the whole podcast, I hope you'll hear that I've been high on a fair number of teams. And so I think, I'm trying really hard to be objective about the Habs. I have their range where I kind of think they might finish would be 2 to 4.
Okay.
So that's a pretty tight window. And something I said much earlier is that, to me, the offensive firepower of a team kind of dictates their ceiling to me, and the defensive ability, both not just the defense on a roster, but their defensive play overall.
Yeah.
And, just keeping the puck out of the net dictates to me their floor. And I think they have the highest floor in the Canadian division.
What about Vancouver?
I think that the Habs will allow less goals than Vancouver.
Okay.
But Vancouver will probably score significantly more.
Okay.
So that standings-wise, their floor is going to end up being higher.
Just making sure. Get you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my sink or swim candidate is not going to be related to a player who's going to be integral in keeping the puck out of the net, because I think that they have so many strong defensive players.
Joel Edmondson, who we were talking about before, by the way, his outlet passes in 75% success rate.
Whoa.
So that's pretty good.
I'm guessing he doesn't make a lot of them.
Yeah, probably not.
You know what I mean? He probably would only make an outlet pass if it is real obvious or he has no choice.
Still, that's nice to have from a guy who's playing in your bottom 4.
I was talking about him in the Senators, right?
That's correct.
If you're a Habs fan and you're curious, my thoughts kind of defending him a little bit, and you're just catching this as a clip, you might want to go check that video out. So when I was considering the sink or swim candidate for the Habs, I thought right away about Price, Weber, obviously, but to me those guys are known commodities.
Yeah.
We're taking injuries off the table here, because every team's MVP is their sink or swim candidate if they get injured. You know what I mean? Like, so like, yes, Price and Weber have both had some injury history, but it didn't feel very fruitful to talk about that.
Yeah.
So I took them off. Petrie, I know what I'm getting out of him. Edmondson, I feel the same way.
Very good player.
I considered Sherratt because in the return to play, when the Habs were what they hoped to be moving forwards, Ben Sherratt played statistically like a top pairing defenseman.
Yeah.
If you look at his points per, like his goals per 60, assists per 60, hits, block shots, Corsi, time on ice, he was number 2 or number 3.
Even before the pause, he was doing really well.
Yeah, he had a great year.
And we were talking about Winnipeg earlier, and I failed to mention that, like, with the implosion of defensemen, I didn't include Sherratt as actually, when he's gone to Montreal, it's definitely made that absence hurt more, for sure.
Yeah, so I considered him because I was like, well, what happens if he can't replicate that? But I think that you look down the left side, they may not have the talent in terms of like the ceiling of what they have on the left side, but you look at like if there ends up being a world where they have some combination of Kulak, Edmondson, Mete, Romanov on the left side, that's not gonna drop them too far down the standings.
No.
Like, it's not that big of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, like, well, what's the worst case scenario if Sherratt just can't play hockey anymore? It's not that different.
No.
Because I think that one of those 3 guys would have it in them to step up and at least be serviceable playing next to Weber. So
that's fair.
So for that reason, I crossed him off the list. I thought about what they have down the middle, but to me, there's just so many guys who, like, it was kind of like evaluating the Leafs' bottom 6, where it's like, if one guy doesn't bring it, there are so many others who can fill the gap. Like, if Deneau gets traded, or, I mean, he's a known commodity. He's gonna be dynamite at 5-on-5.
Yeah.
But if Suzuki struggles, well, one of Kotkaniemi or Paling, like, I just feel like they'll find it by committee if one guy really struggles at center. So my guy for sink or swim, I think that, so I mentioned before, there aren't a lot of players on the team who struggle in the defensive zone. This is the one guy who I feel can really struggle in the defensive zone. And so his value comes from his offensive production.
Okay.
And he's also, I think Suzuki and Kotkaniemi might get there in their careers, but he's the one guy right now who has the talent level to just make something out of nothing in the offensive zone. Okay. My sink or swim guy for the Habs is Jonathan Drouin. So he has been I'm not comparing him to Matt Murray in terms of overall value. Right. But I'm going to compare him to Matt Murray in the fact that he's been statistically average, not because he's been average every game, but because Drouin has been the best player on the ice, including Weber and Price, or he's been the worst, or just like invisible and bad in his own zone. There's not an in-between? There's no in-between. Like he, like 2 years ago, he was on pace for like 75 points, and then went 19 games with 1 point. That's the exact sort of thing I'm thinking about here. Or last year, before he got hurt, he was like, there are so many interviews of Habs players saying, Drouin has been our best player so far, like just praising him endlessly. And they might not have said like better than Price in the interview, but like guys were calling him the team's best skater, and he was on pace for 70 plus
overall pick. He's got a pedigree.
And you think of some of the highlight reel goals he scored in his career, he can just make something out of nothing. But he came back from injury, and he was invisible most times. Like the chemistry that he'd kind of built with Armia and Domi was gone, and he like kind of bounced around the lines a little bit. The team was struggling by that point, and he had a tough conclusion to the regular season. That said, in the return to play, he came back, and him and Suzuki, that was the first time they'd really gotten some sustained minutes together, and something clicked. Like, Drouin is a very, very intelligent player. Suzuki is a very, very intelligent player, and they just found each other on the ice.
Yeah.
Like, those two led the Habs in points in the return to play.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like Kotkaniemi did great in the return to play. His shooting percentage was unsustainable. Like, he would have been on pace for like a 45 goal year. Like, that's not who he is.
No.
When Suzuki and Drouin were playing together, they clicked. And Drouin has had a very hard time clicking with players. So I maybe insulted him a little bit by comparing him to Matt Murray. I'm going to flatter him by comparing him to Sidney Crosby.
Wow.
In that, not overall level, but just in the fact that, like, Sidney Crosby needs guys who are on the same wavelength as him.
Yeah, that's totally true.
And Drouin hasn't had those guys in the Habs.
I think I can afford you that.
And like, Drouin hasn't even always been on the same wavelength as himself. He hasn't always been himself on the Habs.
Yeah.
Because they tried him at center, and like he said after the year, it was like I forgot how to play hockey. And then he came back and he clicked with Domi and Shaw, and things were good. So the conditions are there, and right now I see him lined up with Suzuki and Josh Anderson. And the conditions are there where Jonathan Drouin could put up again, I don't know how long the season's going to be, but if it's an 82-game season, I just kind of think in that kind of pace, I think he could be a 70 to 90 point player.
Oh, wow.
Because he's
right per 82.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's already been a 70 point player both of the last 2 years until he just stopped for some reason. Whether it was the injury, whether it was the just weird ice cold streak.
Yeah.
He's been a 70 point player.
Yeah.
Accounting for, getting hot and cold within those stretches. He's been that guy. I think playing with a guy like Suzuki, if they have the chemistry it looked like they might, and then having Josh Anderson on the right wing, who creates so much space for the guys he's playing with.
Yeah.
I think that those guys could click as a unit in a really special way.
That could be nice.
And so for that reason, I see him maybe being able to produce more than the 70-point pace he's already been at multiple times.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not saying I expect that.
Yeah.
I'm saying that logically, the conditions are there for that to happen.
Yeah, I accept that.
For him to be over a point a game guy.
Yeah.
And if he's that guy, the Habs are first or second in the Canadian division.
Okay.
Because you know what you're getting. And because if he's that guy, it means Suzuki is that guy. And it means Anderson. There's a domino effect.
Yeah.
But that said, I also have to be realistic and recognize that he might finish the season at what would be a 50-55 point pace. Like he has the last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
That's worst case scenario. I don't think there's any way he's worse than that. But I think if that happens, the Habs that says a lot, because it means they probably don't, maybe they have depth now where maybe they run a Toffoli, Suzuki, Anderson second line.
Okay.
But if you don't get that out of Jonathan Drouin, the team is now missing some of that elite skill. The team has no elite offensive skill without Jonathan Drouin being that guy. Because, like I said before, Kotkaniemi and Suzuki might be that guy down the road, but I don't think they're going to be game-breaking talents. I think it'd be very naive to suggest they're going to be game-breaking talents offensively next year. That would be, I think, unrealistic.
Yeah, it might be too much too soon.
Yeah, the long-term projections that I've been reading for these guys as like best case scenario, who could they become? Nick Suzuki gets. He was getting a lot of Bergeron.
Wow.
But Bergeron is not a game-breaking offensive talent.
He does make other players game-breaking, though. Like Marchand's been 40 goal scorer multiple times.
Right.
As much as you love or hate his licking,
you can't help but respect Marchand's offensive.
And Pasternak as well as a line, right? So, I mean, maybe he's got a benefit of playing with good players, but he makes other players break the game. So.
Yeah, and like Bergeron, he puts up elite offensive numbers. Deneau puts up very good offensive numbers at 5-on-5, but when you look at the skill set, there's nothing game-breaking that can just make something like Deneau, for example, produces pretty well because of, I think, quantity of chances.
Yeah.
Because the puck's just always on the other team's end when he's on the ice, not because he's finishing super difficult plays. I think Suzuki might kind of be, he'll put up the numbers, maybe like a Bergeron will, but he like Drouin's hands are just like his tool set. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
If they don't have him being
Drouin, Tampa Bay Lightning, 3-on-3 overtime.
Yes,
look it up.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. Those goals, some of those goals he scored. He's the only guy on the Habs who can bring that elite talent level. And you can't go far in this league without anyone on your team who can do that.
Yeah. So, to jump in here, do you have any qualms or reservations about Tatar and Deneau running it back? No? Okay. Because you sound like you're putting a lot on Drouin. I was just wondering, do you think Tatar and Deneau will show up at the same clip that they did last year? I think it's important because it seems like they're working themselves into an own rental situation, which I don't blame them. I don't think they can really afford to keep both in the long term. But I don't think they're better off dealing them for pieces,
futures,
right? For futures. So no qualms about that.
No, because when those guys, the way to I think evaluate them isn't their individual point production. It's what they bring as a line with those two and Brendan Gallagher. And ever since they were put together 2 years ago, they've been like one of the very best lines in the league at 5-on-5 in terms of goal differential.
True.
And they're going to be that again this year.
Yeah.
They're going to get put out against the other team's top lines, and they're going to score more than they get scored on. That's just like 100% of the time that they've played together, they've been that line. So I think it would be quite illogical to say it's going to change now because there's been no indication there's been no indication that they can be your go-to line offensively. They can't. That's why I see a guy like Drouin being so important because. If Thomas Tatar is your leading scorer again, that's not good.
Might be a bit tough. So I guess a few thoughts is I'm not quite as high, and I've been touting this theme a lot on Montreal for the regular season, so I've been kind of withholding some of my thoughts or projections on rankings. You're giving ranges. So I'll just kind of reiterate some of the things that I've already said, and I haven't said some thoughts for the last few teams. So I thought in a regular season scenario, I think Toronto is going to go number 1, Vancouver 2, Edmonton 3. I think Montreal will be 4th. And then I see Calgary, Winnipeg, and then Ottawa at the end. So I think there's a lot of chances we can see. I like your idea of giving ranges because it's not quite as static. My takes could age really poorly, but what I've been saying is I've been emphasizing regular season. I think Montreal, when it gets to the postseason, especially if they begin the postseason matching up against divisions, so a Canadian team versus Canadian team, I think Montreal is going to be best equipped to go a reasonable distance into the postseason. So I think they've got some really good Ds. They've got 2 number 1 Ds on their right side in Petrie and Weber. They've got a great goalie. And when the game changed that much in the postseason, I think, Habs are best built for the postseason, but I'm only going to put them at 4 for the regular season. Yep. So that was right at the bottom of your floor for them. Yep. That's kind of how I see it. And people are welcome to think differently. We both think similarly and differently on different points. But I guess I'm going to have to say your sink or swim candidate's a lot better than mine. This is going to sound like a little bit of a cop-out here. I loved all the points that you're saying about Drouin, but I think that Montreal's sink or swim candidate is their 2C. And I'm not even going to suggest who it is, but I think when you're talking about Drouin having a year, you're saying Suzuki seems like a candidate because of the chemistry that's there, or Kotkaniemi could play his way to a 2C. We'll see how the system plays out, but I think it's really important that there's some stability, especially because in light of just calling Dano and Tatar likely own rentals at this point. Again, things can change. I think having an established 2C is going to be really, really important for the implications of how they do this season and next. Now, I'm kind of withholding who I'm naming here. Suzuki's got a lot of hype, and I think he played really well this year. Not sure where you stood on how many Calder votes he got, if it was too little or not, but I mean, Hughes and Makar.
You can't take it away from the guys who...
low-key, bring up Columbus again. If we had more of a season, sorry, I butchered that. He was my candidate for a Calder with how hot he was and considering how Columbus did. But again, he's splitting starts and he's in the timeshare. And so there wasn't enough runway, I think, for him to be a legitimate candidate. So that could be maybe a bit of a hot take to some, especially if you're huge Quinn Hughes fans, which why wouldn't you be, right?
So he finished ninth in the Calder this year, which if you rate it in terms of objectively this season they put up, I think is fine. But this isn't how it's ranked, but if you rank it in terms of most promising rookies, I think he launches up over a Marino, an Olofsson, a Blackwood, a Kubalik. I think he's top 5.
I do like Kubalik.
He's 24 though. He's 3 years older and he's a winger.
I know.
So
I don't know. I just just a side note.
For sure.
I'm expressing I liked him. So Suzuki could be that. KK has usually come out pretty hot, if my memory serves right, both in his rookie year and his sophomore year. Now he had to go back to the AHL. I think that was good for his game. I think he was really receptive to that, which is important, to have players be realistic about this is going to be best for my development, so I'll do it.
It wasn't like a Jonathan Drouin in Tampa.
Josh Hosang. Guys like this, and so I think that's really good. He's got the right attitude. He's got some great tools. He came back, and this kid is huge now. He tossed some guys around in the return to play. I thought that was really good. He started out pretty hot the last few seasons and kind of fizzled, I guess, for lack of a better. So So we'll see, I think, between him and Suzuki, the sustainability of their production, being young players. Again, I'm blanketing it as just a 2C, but I think however they can find sustainability, they need to find it at the 2C. That's going to go a long way for them reaching that ceiling that you had. So that's one of my thoughts. It's kind of interesting, though. Kotkaniemi is having a bit of a slow start overseas, but has been doing quite a bit better as of late. Scored 2 goals the other game. So
he's got 4 points in the last 6 periods, and I think he had a really tough adjustment to being back in the European style of hockey. And there was a really good interview that came out on the Habs Athletic where he was talking about that a little bit. Like, the mindset of European hockey is so different in the big ice, not just but it's so much slower. You can kind of wait for the game to come to you a little bit more. It's such a different game. And I think he was kind of able to just tweak his game a little bit and starting to get a little bit of puck luck too. Like some of the highlights that came out where he was just, there was one that was an insane cross crease pass to his line mate who was flying in and got it like right where you'd want it, right across the crease. The goalie was sliding over and just couldn't bury it. So like the team's trash, his line mates were trash. It was just, and he was struggling to adjust, but I was worried. Maybe because I'm a bit I'm just worried. What if him and Suzuki don't turn up? Then I don't even want to think about what that means for the Habs.
I won't make you go there.
Because by the time you find out, it's too late to trade Price and Weber for anything. It's just, that's a nightmare scenario. So so anytime I see someone like Kotkaniemi struggling, it's like...
So hold on, just like what you're saying earlier with your projected lines, are you saying Toffoli is going to be on the 3rd line then with whoever it is between Kotkaniemi and Suzuki?
I will say sort of. I don't see them doing a traditional 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that the Tatar, Deneau, Gallagher line is going to eat defensive zone starts. I think you're going to have Drouin, Suzuki, Anderson being a unit, and Toffoli. I'm going to guess Byron, Kotkaniemi, and Toffoli because of a phrase I made up called puck economy. I think the next best player to be on that left in that 3rd line is Joel Armia. I think Joel Armia is a 20-goal scorer.
I like him.
But if you look at the like skater charts of the Habs wingers, all the Habs forwards, so many of them are in like 85, 90, 95 percentile of shots.
Oh wow!
They're just volume shooters. Toffoli is super. He's like upper 90s percentile. Kotkaniemi shoots a surprising amount. There's just and Armia, I love him, but he's a bit of a puck hog. And he's a high volume shooter as well. And Byron is the lowest volume shooter in the Habs. And he has a very high shooting percentage. And he's he can play any wing slot from the 1st to 4th line and not embarrass himself. He gets more effective the further down you move him. So I think just as a guy who's like really, really working hard on back checking, on forechecking, on getting the puck to, and sort of letting Kotkaniemi to fully play a 2-man game, with Byron just being a utility, kind of like a Zach Hyman kind of role. He does go and dig for pucks, even though he's maybe not the biggest guy. He's not shy about playing in corners. So and so Byron's not going to be huge and pull the puck out of the corner. That's where Armia is dominant, but he's going to force a lot of turnovers. And I see Kotkaniemi Toffoli trying to get something going, chemistry-wise. If it doesn't work, I'd be shocked if Anderson drops down, just because of the another term I made up called investment bias, where you put a lot into something and you really need to see them succeed. So
definitely
with the contract they gave him, he's going to get every shot.
Yeah, well, you see this all the time. A guy like Anthony Duclair has been hurt by that in some situations because he's moved around the league so much. Say in Columbus, he didn't get much of a chance because he was a pickup, right? Where like this isn't someone that they've drafted or that they've paid a lot of money and they're really trying to cultivate to get a yield right from that player. So it was a big money acquisition, and they want obviously that to pan out for the next 7 years that they're assigned to him. And so a guy like Duclair, I guess, was my first example that comes to mind, where he wasn't drafted by I think 3 of the last teams that he played on, right? And so that investment bias when he was in Arizona and Columbus was a little bit different because management's not like, this isn't our guy, right? So
if it's your first round pick or your guy you gave a big contract to, you're going to try and make it work for them. So that's for the exact same factor, but the other side of the coin is why I see Toffoli starting lower, and Drouin starting higher.
And assuming that some of these other players graduate to free agency, like Tatar, Toffoli won't have to spend too much time. He's not going to be wallowing down near the bottom of the lineup. I think, that being said, Habs are in a pretty great situation. To make that situation even better, Claude Julien is always a coach who has his team's ready to go out of the gate. In a short season, that's going to mean a lot. They started 10-0 just a couple seasons ago, right, with Claude under the helm. So assuming that his health has been getting a lot better, but in a short season, that's going to go that much further. It's going to be one of those X factors, right? One of those things that you won't see on ice, but will translate to something, I think, on ice that's going to be really important for the Habs in this division.
You know what? I would like to see less of that, because that identity goes back to the Terrien teams, where basically it was due to necessity. They just come at you with speed. And when teams are rusty at the start of the year, they're just making them make mistakes. And the reason why they've done so much of that is because they've had no other choice than to just try and their whole game for years and years now has just been make the other team make mistakes. So I think if they come out doing that again this year, I don't want to say it's a bad sign, but it's not a great sign. Because they've been trying to change their identity to a team that can put the puck in the net, that's bigger, that can win board battles and score off the cycle. It's not all just fast break and turnovers and, so I think that would, if that happens, it means that's how they're running the team. And if a coach is committing to that kind of a system, it's for a reason. So I would rather than be having success, more measured success early on, from scoring just good goals. Scoring different ways, like off the cycle, off the rush, off possession. So I hope that actually isn't the same. I see what you're saying, and how in a short season that would be more valuable, but I'm hoping that things are a little different this year. I think that'd be more conducive to bigger picture success.
Sustainability is really, really key in the NHL. So
I'm curious what if you had to bet on how Josh Anderson was going to do this year. If you think in terms of an 82 game pace, how many goals, assists, what do you think his year looks like?
I think My sense, and I could be wrong, is that his production isn't going to look bad, but I think to his own benefit, he's going to be utilized on the power play, and he's going to rack up power play points, probably to a point where I'd be maybe a bit uncomfortable with his ratio to power play to even strength. That's kind of what I predict, but I think that's going to be a bit of a metric of that investment bias, right? Where like you're going to want to have some results yielded out, and so you're going to give him a lot of power play time, a lot of work around the net, a lot of just like trying to bury garbage. He's more of a player than just that, but I think that's a niche that he can provide for Montreal, and so I think he'll do all right, but I have a suspicion his stats might be inflated by how many he gets on the power play. So that's just because he put me on the spot. That would be my take about it.
That is interesting. I don't mean to like put you on the spot and then be like, well, actually, but so I obsess about the Habs, and especially like I love the off season. Maybe more than at least as much as
a Sens fan, I can relate to that. Recently, it's like, definitely better to watch the off season.
Yeah, that's fair. And Habs have been a similar story for sure. But like in terms of trades, free agents, to me, I think about it all so much, and I was not expecting Josh Anderson. I didn't have him on my list. Not that I have any kind of insider info, but just in terms of like, I hate it when people do that, where they're like, oh, I can say a guy gets drafted like 7th, and they're like, oh, that's a bad pick. I had him 12th on my draft list. It's like...
speaking of guys drafted, Anton Lundell, he wasn't the 7th pick, pretty sure it's the 6th, had a 6-point night the other game, so that is pretty nice.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, not bad. I was thinking of that when you're talking about Kotkaniemi. But we're armchair GM can get a little overboard. Yeah. There's so many times I think in the league where you can realize like, wow, we actually kind of know nothing.
Literally nothing.
Like
JT Miller.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. No, but so when we picked him up, I was like, I don't know anything about this guy, so I'm going to try and do some research. So I started by looking up. There was a great post on the Habs subreddit that went over. There's been some articles in the medical. What's it called? Medical Journal of Science. I'm probably a big idiot saying that title. I think I'm wrong, but it's the Medical Journal something. It's super official on the kind of surgery he'd had done and on how players bounce back, which is really encouraging. Basically, it like ruins your game unless you get the surgery. But people are hesitant to get the surgery because the rehab is so long. Right. And that's what caused that beef in Columbus, because he was like, I need this surgery, my game is going downhill. Yeah. And Columbus was like, we're trying to be competitive, we need you. Maybe get it in the off season, and they were really discouraging him. So
it's almost like the Kawhi situation in San Antonio,
very similar.
On the other side of the spectrum, where the rehab's taking this long and you need to respect it. Right?
So that was very encouraging that things are really positive. He's had so much time to get healthy, and so I just want to go through how he's sort of progressed in terms of his goal scoring. So his rookie year, he had 17 goals in 78 games. All 17 were even strength. His sophomore year at 23 years old, 19 goals in 63 games. That's about a 24 goal pace. Yeah. And of those 19, 18 were even strength. His third year was the really, really good one. Not this season, but the one before, where he had 27 goals. And 22 of them were even strength. Okay. So he's never really been in a situation where, like, 5 power play goals, that's second unit kind of numbers. Yeah. And I would be shocked if...
Or 5th, 6th option, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'd be shocked if he is on the first unit, because he seems to be able to have success scoring without it. Yeah. I would have...
Gallagher probably does a lot of the role that I described, that I envision Anderson doing.
Ideally,
Yeah.
But that's kind of something that maybe holds him back from like Team Canada kind of conversation. Is his skill set. Like, he's going to get numbers, but it's not by incredible displays of skill. Like, he's kind of like Deneau in that he's not really suited for... He's not as good on the power play as they are in 5-on-5.
Right.
So Gallagher's numbers on the power play, not that impressive. The guy who changed that for me in terms of thinking Anderson was going to have that number one spot is Toffoli.
Okay.
Because he's a guy who is he's that on the power play. He's the net front. He's the guy who's finishing one-timers, banging in goals.
Fair enough.
So I see a power play of... It's interesting because like Domi's gone. Like, a lot has sort of changed in terms of their power play structure. But I look at maybe the Drouin-Suzuki pairing and Toffoli there as your three kind of forwards, like Drouin and Suzuki on opposite sides, Toffoli in the middle. And then I know not a lot of teams are doing this, but I think they run two defensemen. Because Weber, their power play with Weber quarterbacking it just hurts to watch.
Right.
That's just not who he is. Like, they've had a terrible power play. And when
he's more of a option for one-timers. What you're saying, keep him on there, but don't run it through him. Yeah,
2 years ago when Weber missed a lot of time, they had their best power play that they've had since he joined the team when Petrie was quarterbacking the power play. So.
You know, I'm pretty sure Vegas with Schmidt and Theodore were doing that on there. So
it's rare now, though.
It's not very common.
Yeah, increasingly so. So that leaves them with a bit of a tough... Like, do you have Mete on the point of your second unit? Like, it's tough.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I see, like, an Anderson, Kotkaniemi, who else might... Maybe... Oh, and Tatar, probably, like, on the second. So I would be surprised if they run Anderson big minutes on the power play, but...
Fair.
But I could be wrong.
Fair.
So, yeah.